I brought gifts home. They brought out the cold. I flew into Wisconsin on the afternoon of December 23rd. The snow had fallen thick and early this year, layering rooftops and blanketing the cornfields long after the harvest. I hadn't been home in almost 6 years, but this time I was trying. Not because I'd forgotten how it felt to be the odd one out, but because some small part of me still hoped that if I came back open-hearted, maybe they'd meet me halfway. I packed gifts carefully wrapped in silver foil paper with soft snowflake patterns. Each ribbon was tied with care. Each tag is handwritten. I brought homemade butter cookies in a tin and a set of hand-poured lavender candles for my mother. In my suitcase, I had a new velvet dress in deep red, something festive, elegant. Something I imagined wearing while standing by the fire, sipping cider, laughing with people who remembered how to love me. When the cab pulled up to the old house, the one I once called home, its windows were warm with light. Laughter spilled from inside. Children's voices, Christmas music. The smell of roasted turkey wafted faintly through the cold air. I climbed out, holding the gift bags in one hand, the handle of my suitcase in the other. My heart beat a little faster. I told myself, this is going to be different. My mother answered the door. She wore a crisp white sweater with a stitched pine tree near the hem and a brooch shaped like a snowflake. Her smile was polite. Not cruel, not kind, just distant. "Oh," she said, "you're here. I told you I'd be," I replied gently, trying to smile. "It's good to see you." She didn't take the bags. Instead, she glanced behind her into the house. "We're in the kitchen. Everyone's here already." Inside the house was buzzing with conversation. My brother was carving the turkey, his wife pouring wine. My nieces were curled up near the fireplace, the tree glittering behind them. My cousins were clustered at the table, gossiping like teenagers. It was full, warm, familiar. But the moment I stepped in, it was like I didn't belong. No one stood up to greet me. No one said, "Welcome back." I took off my coat, quietly hung it near the door, and tried to blend in. I handed the gift bags to my mother. She didn't look inside. She set them on the counter like grocery bags. When dinner was winding down and people were beginning to gather around the fireplace, I approached my mother. "Which room should I take?" I asked casually. I left my suitcase in the cab. She didn't hesitate. Her voice was calm, level, like she was discussing tablecloths. "Oh," she said, "we didn't prepare a room for you. We're full this year. Alex is staying in your old room. He doesn't like hotels." I stared at her. "So, where should I stay?" She gave a vague shrug. "You can book a place near the lake. I think the Lakeside Inn still has rooms." A cousin awkwardly looked away. My father sat on the far side of the room, quiet. He didn't even glance over. My brother didn't speak. I felt something hard and quiet lodge itself in my chest. They didn't forget. They planned this. They knew I was coming. And they chose not to make space for me. I didn't say anything. I didn't make a scene. I just nodded. I walked down the hallway past the guest bathroom. I paused, steadying my hands, trying to breathe. I grabbed my scarf off the hook near the back door. That's when I noticed something that made my throat tighten. A niece, a sweet girl who didn't know better, was drying her hands with a towel I had gifted my mother last Christmas. White terry cloth, embroidered with each family member's name. Mine had been tucked in a drawer last I checked. I stepped outside into the cold. No one followed. No one called my name. Snow was falling again, big soft flakes landing gently on my coat sleeves. I pulled my scarf tighter, listening. Inside, someone started playing Christmas carols. "O Holy Night," they sang in perfect harmony. Their voices floated through the frosted windows like something out of a postcard. Warm, beautiful, distant. It was the first time I didn't feel angry. I didn't even feel sad. I just understood. No one asked where I was going, but they didn't expect someone would be waiting for me. I stood at the edge of the driveway, phone in hand, trying not to shiver as the wind whipped around my ankles. Snow clung to the hem of my coat, melting into cold against my tights. I had just opened the Uber app, when I heard the sound slow, low, deliberate. Tires crunching through fresh snow, headlights slicing the dusk like a knife through fabric. A sleek black Rolls-Royce Ghost glided silently down the lane, as out of place on this small-town street as a cathedral in a cornfield. The car stopped directly in front of the house. For a moment I thought maybe someone had ordered a car for a guest. Maybe I was hallucinating. But then the back door opened and he stepped out. Andre. Tall, calm, wrapped in a tailored gold coat. He looked exactly the same as he always did, professional, warm present. The kind of man who made you feel safe without ever needing to say it. He met my eyes, gave the smallest nod. No surprise, no pity, just readiness. I exhaled. "Miss Blake," he said softly as he reached for my suitcase. "Shall we?" I nodded. "Yes, please." From the front window, someone shifted the curtain. I saw the flicker of movement before it fell back into place. My aunt, a quiet woman who had once braided my hair when I was little, murmured just loud enough for someone to hear. "She has a chauffeur." Someone else whispered, "Is that a rental?" "Can't be. No, that's hers." "Wait, is that Andre from New York?" But I didn't turn around. I didn't need to. I slid into the back seat, the leather still warm from the heater, the scent of cedar and citrus gently washing over me like a hug I didn't know I needed. Andre closed the door behind me. The snow muffled everything. For a moment we sat in silence. Then the engine stirred low and steady, and the car pulled away from the curb. I didn't look back. Until I did. Through the window, fogged lightly at the edges, I could just make out the front of the house. My mother had stepped onto the balcony, in her white sweater arms, folded eyes squinting through the snowfall. Her face was pale, blank, but not neutral. Shock, disbelief. It didn't matter anymore. I turned my gaze forward, resting my head against the seat. Inside the car, it was warm, peaceful. Andre didn't ask any questions. He just reached forward, pressed a button, and soft piano music filled the space between us. Chopin. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. My hands were still trembling slightly. Andre glanced at me in the mirror. "You good?" I gave him a small smile. "Better now. Would you like to head to the house?" "Yes," I said. "Let's go home." We drove through the outskirts of town past the gas station, where I used to buy peach ring candies as a kid, past the school I once swore I'd never return to. The buildings faded into fields, then into forest. And finally, we turned onto the winding coastal road. The moonlight caught the ocean just as it came into view, soft waves gray-blue under winter sky. Andre slowed as we approached the gates. The security system recognized the car instantly. The iron archway swung open. And there it was. My sanctuary. My beach house. Clean white walls, glass windows glowing gold, the sea barely a breath away. As we pulled into the driveway, the porch lights came on. I watched them flicker against the snow, and I felt something shift inside me. Something heavy and old begin to fall away. For years I had chased my family's approval like it was air. For years I thought maybe if I did well enough, succeeded loud enough, bought big enough, they'd make room for me again. But tonight in this car, watching the home I built come into view through the frost-kissed glass, I realized the truth. I didn't lose a home tonight. I reclaimed myself. Andre parked gently and opened the door. I stepped out, heels clicking against the stone snow, swirling around my coat like a slow dance. Inside, the lights were waiting. And this time, they were for me. I once called my mother and asked for $300. She said, "You need to learn to take responsibility." It's easy to look at me now and see the finish line, the tailored coat, the quiet confidence, the beach house that hums with calm. But no one ever asks about the years in between, the long stretch of road between the girl who left home at 19 and the woman who now signs payroll for 42 employees. But I remember. I remember everything. When I left home the first time, I didn't slam the door. I didn't scream. I just packed a duffel bag, wrote a note on the kitchen table, and caught a Greyhound to Chicago. I had $642 in my checking account, a binder full of design sketches, and a half-finished essay on why modern marketing needed more emotion and less manipulation. I thought I'd make it within a year. I didn't. For a long time, I made just enough to survive. I worked at a diner downtown 3 months. Then I moved to a hotel near the Navy Pier and worked front desk. I smiled through weekends, handed out key cards, and learned to listen when people were angry. I learned how to say, "I'm sorry you feel that way," without meaning it. I got good at blending in. Some nights I took my tips and bought rotisserie chicken from the 24-hour grocery store. I'd eat it on the fire escape, watching other people's windows glow with yellow light. Other nights I cried in laundromats. I told myself, "Keep going. They'll see you one day." But they didn't. 5 years ago, everything came undone. My roommate moved out without notice, taking half the rent money with her. My freelance gigs dried up after a marketing agency ghosted me post-pitch. And when my phone bill hit $117, I didn't have it. I remember the exact moment I ran out of gas. It was February. I was sitting in my car parked behind a CVS. It was 19 degrees outside. I had 3 layers on and I was still shaking. I called my mom. It had been over a year since we last spoke. She picked up on the third ring. Her voice was tight-clipped, the same tone she used when she didn't want neighbors to hear. "Hello, hi, Mom," I said. "It's me. I need help." Just a little. I wouldn't ask if it wasn't serious. Silence. "How much?" $300. Just for rent. Or my phone. "I'll pay you back, I swear." There was a pause. Then her voice cold as glass. "Samantha, we can't keep funding your fantasies. At some point, you have to learn to take responsibility for your choices." It wasn't the words that crushed me. It was how easy they came to her. Like she'd practiced them. She hung up before I could say thank you or goodbye. That night, I slept in my car. Then again the night after that. By the third night, I was too tired to cry. So I did what I've always done. I reached for something I could build. I took out my cracked laptop, borrowed Wi-Fi from a Starbucks, and started writing. Not resumes, not pitches, but stories. Raw ones. About anxiety. About failure. About that moment when you sit on the floor with a final shut-off notice and think, is this it? I posted my first blog on a free site. 5 people read it, then 50, then 100. Then someone emailed me and said, "Thank you for putting into words what I didn't know how to say." That was the first time I felt seen. The blog turned into a weekly series. I added coaching worksheets. I built a newsletter, then a simple course. I taught people how to navigate burnout, how to set boundaries, how to stop performing worthiness. 1 year later, I launched my company, Rooted, a wellness platform for women who felt invisible. Women like me. I started hiring designers, therapists, coaches, admins. All women who had known what it meant to rebuild from scratch. And slowly, it grew. The beach house in Montauk didn't come right away. It came after our third funding round. After I finally let myself believe that I could build something sacred from all that shame. I found the listing online at 2 a.m. on a rainy night. It was old, a little worn. The kitchen tile needed replacing and the shutters were crooked. But when I walked through it the first time barefoot on creaky wood floors, I whispered aloud, "This is where I come back to life." It became more than a home. It became a refuge. I hosted our first retreat here the following fall. 8 women, all strangers, all carrying stories they hadn't told out loud. We cooked together, journaled on the porch, sat in silence without needing to explain ourselves. It was the first time I felt like I had a family again. Not one made of blood, but one built from survival, from softness, from chosen truth. And now every December I come back here, not to remember the pain, but to honor the path. Because the girl who once slept in her car, she didn't disappear. She just grew up and built a home no one could take from her. I didn't need them to open the door. I had a home no one could push me out of. The beach house stood quietly under a sky dusted with stars. The snow here was softer, untouched. The ocean just beyond the dunes whispered like it had been waiting. Inside, golden light spilled onto the porch, flickering gently from the tall windows. There was a stillness to it, not lonely, but sacred. Andre pulled into the driveway and got out to open my door as he always did. I stepped out, heels crunching lightly against stone. The moment I touched the railing of the front steps, I felt my shoulders drop, my breath deepen. This place had a pulse, and I could feel it sinking with mine. As we walked in, warmth wrapped around me. "Welcome home," someone called from the kitchen. It was Alana, my operations manager, and more importantly, my closest friend. She had a glass of wine in one hand and a small apron over her silk dress, her hair twisted up like always. Behind her, lights had been strung loosely across the beams, casting everything in amber glow. On the table, candles flickered beside a charcuterie board, roasted vegetables, wine bottles, already half emptied. The scent of cinnamon, rosemary, and garlic hung in the air. And laughter, real laughter. 4 of my core team members were already here. Dana, our brand designer, Jay, our editor, Liv, our customer success manager. All women who had once come to me as clients or collaborators and stayed as something deeper. No one asked why I left my family's dinner early. No one needed an explanation. They just moved to make space. Dana slid a chair out beside her. "Sit," she said. We were just about to open the dessert wine. I took my coat off slowly, soaking it all in. No performance, no measuring up, no cold smiles, just welcome. Andre stepped into the kitchen, having changed into a dark wool sweater. He took a small plate, joined the others. He was one of us here. No uniforms, no titles, just a quiet presence who had seen all sides of me and never flinched. Later, as we lit sparklers on the back deck and passed around mugs of cider, he came to stand beside me. We leaned on the railing, watching the waves roll in. He didn't say much, but after a long pause, he whispered almost to himself, "When I saw you outside that house, standing there holding your coat like armor, I wanted to tell you they were wrong. Every single one of them." I swallowed the lump rising in my throat. I didn't feel angry, I told him softly. Just clear. Like something clicked. He nodded. That kind of clarity only comes when you've had to earn your peace. Back inside, I took my journal from the bookshelf, the one with all my scraps of writing. Fragments of the book I've been quietly building for 3 years now. Alana handed me a glass of wine and smiled, already knowing. "Read it," she said. "You always read something on Christmas Eve." I opened to a page I'd written 2 months ago, not knowing how perfectly it would fit tonight. The room quieted. The fire crackled. I began, "Family isn't always born. Sometimes it's built with long nights, soft shoulders, shared silence. Sometimes the people who love you most are not the ones who raised you, but the ones who stayed when you unraveled. Not everyone who shares your blood will share your spirit, but everyone who loves you unconditionally, that is family." No one clapped. They didn't need to. Instead, Alana reached over and squeezed my hand. Dana leaned her head on my shoulder. And for a while, no one said anything at all. That silence, it was everything. Later that night, as I walked barefoot across the cool tile floor, checking the locks and dimming the lights, I caught a glimpse of myself in the mirror by the entryway. I looked calm, not composed, not impressive, just calm, steady, enough. I whispered to the reflection, a quiet promise, "You are home now. And you don't have to fight to stay." That girl, she's the CEO of that company everyone's talking about. It happened faster than I expected. I wasn't planning for them to find out. Not through a headline, at least. But life has a rhythm, and sometimes the truth shows up without waiting for permission. It started with a post. My younger cousin Ava had come by the beach house the morning after Christmas. She was one of the few in the family who didn't flinch around me, quiet, observant, a college sophomore with a camera always around her neck. She hugged me tighter than I expected and asked if she could take a few photos. I didn't think anything of it. I'd forgotten she had a decent following on social media. But when I woke up the next morning, her caption was already going viral. "Spent Christmas with my cousin Samantha at the Montauk house. She lives like a movie star, but her energy, pure peace. I hope to be like her one day." Attached was a picture of me barefoot on the porch holding a coffee mug, laughing. Another one at sunset, the waves behind me, a warm scarf draped around my shoulders. Within hours, the comments started pouring in. Wait, Samantha Blake. Is that the same Samantha from Rooted Girl? Your cousin is a legend. By the end of the day, someone tagged me in a new post. Forbes Women. Front page of their digital feature. From homeless to CEO, the million-dollar wellness brand built by Samantha Blake. There it was. My story edited and glossy but true. How I had started with nothing. How Rooted grew to 7 figures. How we now served over 100,000 women a month. And how I ran the entire company from a beach house by the sea. At first, I didn't say anything. I went about my day like normal. Until the text started. First from my mother. A message so simple it could have come from a stranger. Hope you're well. Where are you spending Christmas this year? I stared at it for a long time. Not I'm sorry, not we miss you. Just a vague probe. A fishing line tossed into water she'd abandoned years ago. I didn't answer right away. An hour later, my phone rang. Dad. I hadn't spoken to him on the phone in over 2 years. The screen blinked. I let it ring twice before I picked up. His voice was slower than I remembered. A little tired. Hey, he said. I saw the article. That's something. I said nothing. I guess I just wanted to check in. Make sure you're okay. I am, I said. Do you, need anything? That's when something shifted inside me. I'd spent years craving these words, some form of concern, an opening. But now that I had them, they didn't land the way I thought they would. So I answered honestly. If you're calling to see if I need something, then no, I don't. But if you're calling to apologize, you'll need to do better than this. There was a pause. He sighed. Your mother didn't mean to hurt you. Yes, she did, I said gently. She just didn't think it would matter. He didn't argue. He just breathed heavily on the line like he knew I was right but couldn't say it. We said goodbye a few minutes later. Polite. Civil. It didn't sting. But it didn't heal anything either. Later that week, my cousin Ellie called from Florida. We hadn't spoken in over a year, but she was one of the few in the family who always had a kind word, even if from a distance. Her voice cracked when she said it. They're all talking about you now, at dinner, at church, at brunch. And for once, it's not about your mistakes, it's about how you made it. You know what Aunt Cheryl said, she added with a half laugh. She said, we were wrong about her, just like that. I leaned back against the couch phone pressed to my cheek. I'm not angry, Ellie, I said. Not anymore, I'm just done hoping they'll see me. She was quiet for a beat. Then let me say it, she whispered. I see you. And I'm proud. That night, I sat alone on the back deck with a blanket wrapped around me, listening to the tide come in. I could have replied to my mom's message. I could have called back. But instead, I let the sea carry their silence away. Because now they knew. They knew about the house, the company, the woman I'd become. And for the first time in my life, I didn't need to prove it to them. The truth had arrived on its own, wrapped in headlines, whispered across dinner tables, passed around like legend. I didn't need them to clap. I didn't need them to cry. I just needed them to know the girl they dismissed built something no one could deny. You didn't throw me out, Mom. You just refused to claim me. And for that, I am grateful. It was late. The kind of quiet that only comes after Christmas, when the world has finally exhaled. The beach house was still lit only by a single lamp in the study. Everyone else had gone to bed hours ago. But I couldn't sleep. Something inside me still needed to be said, even if it wouldn't be heard. So I poured a glass of red wine, lit a small candle, and opened my notebook. The pages waited blank and patient. I began to write. Dear Mom, you didn't slam the door. You didn't scream or curse or chase me out of the house. You simply looked at me like I didn't belong and made it clear that you agreed with yourself. You said the house was full. You gave my room to someone else. You offered me a hotel suggestion with the same tone you might use to offer a casserole recipe. You didn't need to say you're not welcome. I felt it in every pause, in every glance that avoided my face, in the way no one asked if I was staying or even why I looked cold. But I want you to know something. I'm not angry. Not anymore. Because in your silence you gave me the greatest gift I've ever received. You taught me that love, real love, doesn't need to be earned. That proving myself, contorting myself, begging for warmth where there is only ice. None of that is love. You freed me from the illusion that blood alone means safety or belonging. And once that illusion shattered, I was finally able to build something real. A home, a chosen family, a life where I am loved not because I am useful or quiet or successful, but simply because I am me. So no, Mom, you didn't throw me out, you just didn't choose me. And in that rejection, I learned how to choose myself. Thank you. Goodbye. Samantha. When I finished the letter, I read it once, not aloud, just with my eyes. Then I folded it carefully, pressed it between two palms like a prayer, and stepped outside. The moon was high, its light turning the snow silver blue. The ocean was louder than usual, waves crashing against the shore like a heartbeat too big for a body. Andre was already standing by the water. He didn't ask anything. He just nodded when he saw me and waited. I walked to the fire pit we'd used the night before for sparklers. I crouched, placed the folded letter inside, and struck a match. It caught flame, quickly curled at the corners, then burst into a sudden orange glow. The words disappeared line by line. When it was done, I gathered the cooled ashes into a small glass jar, the kind we use for homemade oils or sea salts. I wiped the outside clean and grabbed a piece of masking tape from the shed. I wrote on it in black ink, "Closure, 12/25. Then I sealed the lid. Andre stepped closer, his voice low. You sure you want to let it go? I looked at the ocean. Its endlessness, its indifference, its honesty. I don't need her to know, I said. I just need to stop needing her to know. He nodded again. That was his gift presence without pressure. I held the jar for another moment, then placed it on the windowsill facing the east, where the sun would rise in just a few hours. I didn't cry. Not this time. Because this wasn't grief. This was released. And release doesn't always look like sadness. Sometimes it looks like peace. I didn't get revenge. I just never went back. I used to think healing would feel like fireworks, loud, brilliant, undeniable. But in truth, it arrived quietly. Soft as morning light. Firm as a boundary I no longer had to explain. After that Christmas, something inside me settled. Not because everything was fixed, but because I stopped needing it to be. I no longer needed a reckoning. I didn't need apologies laced with guilt or family dinners dressed up in false forgiveness. I needed only this, to build something better. Not out of spite, but out of love for the girl I once was, and every woman still walking through the cold, wondering if she belongs. So I did. I launched the Rooted Circle, a mentorship program for women who had been made to feel like they were too much or not enough for their own families. Women who had been silenced, shamed, and left out of group texts and Christmas cards. Women who carried invisible grief in their bones. Our sessions weren't about productivity. They were about the truth. We met online at first, 40 women from 27 cities. Some of them had children, some had none. Some were divorced, others were barely surviving toxic mothers. But all of them had one thing in common. They were tired of asking to be seen. When I asked them why they joined one woman, Lucia whispered, "Because I don't want to hate my mother anymore. But I don't know how to stop." That night I cried. Not because I was sad, because I recognized her voice in my chest. Soon after, I opened the beach house for something bigger. We called it the Return Retreat. Once a year in late December, women from across the country gather at my home. They arrive in silence, unpack their stories beside strangers who already understand them. We cook together, we journal, we let ourselves be quiet without needing to perform gratitude or grace. There's no curriculum, just presence. And for many of them, It's the first time they've ever been somewhere they didn't have to earn their space. That's what I wanted most to create. Not a program, a place. Where no one has to ask, do I belong here? Because the answer is always yes. Last spring, I began recording a podcast. I called it The Way Back Home. Each week, I share a story, mine or someone else's, about rebuilding after rejection, about what it means to find home within yourself when the one you were born into couldn't hold you. We recorded in the back room of the beach house where the waves are loud, and you can sometimes hear the seagulls in the background. I don't edit them out. I like the reminder. We are not meant to live in boxes. We are meant to expand. The podcast reached 1 million downloads in 7 months. But numbers aren't the part I carry. It's the letters. Handwritten ones. Emails typed in all caps. Voice memos where someone simply cries and says, "Thank you for saying it out loud." They remind me I'm not alone anymore. And I never was. Last week I received another text from my mother. I didn't open it, not out of bitterness, but because I no longer need what's inside. I've outgrown the hunger for recognition, for approval from people who only knew a past version of me they chose not to understand. I've stopped trying to turn cold people into warmth. Instead, I build warmth where none existed before and then invite others in. Today, I'm sitting on the back deck of my beach house. The sun is setting low and crimson pouring across the ocean like melted fire. The sky is bruised lavender and the wind carries the scent of salt and something softer, maybe cedarwood, maybe freedom. I'm wrapped in a knitted shawl, legs tucked beneath me, tea in hand. There's no music, just the sound of waves, just breath. I look out at the water and think of the girl I once was, the one who stood in the snow outside her parents' house, wondering what she had done wrong to be turned away. I want to reach for her, not to rescue her, but to say, "You didn't do anything wrong. They just didn't know how to hold someone like you." And now I hold myself. Not perfectly, not always gracefully, but completely. I don't dream of being invited back anymore. I don't need the table I was once denied. I built my own. And the women who sit with me here, they bring more than conversation. They bring wholeness,